Some raised beds fail right away, and others take a year or two before the problems show up. I've had both. I've had beds where things went wrong almost immediately, and I've had others that looked great in the beginning and then slowly declined over time. And the good news is, all of them are fixable. I am actually rebuilding my whole vegetable garden you see right behind me right now because of this. So in this video, I want to walk you through the biggest mistakes people with raised beds make and how to fix them before they cost you years. Before you even think about soil, before you fill anything, one of the biggest mistakes happens right here, the layout. And this is one of those things that doesn't seem like a big deal at first, but it affects everything you do in your garden. Because if the layout doesn't work, the garden becomes harder to use. And when it's harder to use, you stop maintaining it the way you should. The first thing is bed size. A lot of people build beds too wide. And it makes sense, you're trying to maximize your space, but if you can't comfortably reach into the center of the bed, you're going to run into problems. You'll step into the bed, you'll compact the soil, or you'll just avoid certain areas altogether. For most people, about 3.5 to 4 feet wide is really a good sweet spot. You can reach everything from either side without stepping in. Length matters too. If your beds are too long, every time you need to get to the other side, you're walking all the way around. And that might not sound like a big deal, but when you're out there every day, harvesting, pruning, watering, it adds up fast. Shorter, more manageable beds just make everything easier. Now, the part most people don't think about enough is the space between the beds, the paths, because this is where you actually spend most of your time. And if your paths are too narrow, you can't move comfortably, you can't get the tools through, and something as simple as a wheelbarrow becomes a hassle or impossible. So when I lay these out, I actually test it. I walk through the space, I turn sideways, I kneel down, I'll sit in the path, I'll run the wheelbarrow through, because that's how you're going to use it. And for me, about 2 feet is the minimum where it starts to feel usable. But a little wider than that is even better if you have the space. My paths are 30 inches wide, and compared to the old layout, this layout has a much easier flow and makes it simpler to move around. You don't want to design your garden just to fit more beds. You want to design it so you can actually work in it. Because a raised bed garden that looks good but is hard to use is one that gets neglected. And that leads to more pests and disease and you giving up in June. Another really common mistake is building your raised beds too shallow. And this one depends a lot on what's underneath your bed. If you've got good workable soil below, you can actually get away with a fairly shallow bed. Something like 6 inches can work because the roots can grow down past the bed into the ground. But if you don't have good soil underneath, or you've got compacted ground, hard clay, or even something like concrete, then shallow beds start to become a problem pretty quickly. Because most vegetables want about 1 foot of depth for their roots. And if you don't give them that, you're limiting how they grow right from the start. I ran into this myself. The old beds that I removed were only 6 inches tall, and I had them sitting over decent native soil, so on paper, that should have worked fine. But I also had gopher wire underneath. And what that did was let the really small roots go through, but anything bigger couldn't. So things like carrots or parsnips or anything with a longer root system, they just didn't have the space they needed. And on top of that, I didn't have enough depth to really anchor anything. If I wanted to put in a trellis or a teepee for beans or anything like that, I only had a few inches to work with before I hit that wire. And that's just not enough to hold things steady, especially once plants get big or once you get a little wind. So even though it looked like the setup should work, in practice, it created a lot of limitations. And those are the kind of things you don't always think about when you're building the bed up front. But they do show up once you start growing in it. So the fix here is pretty simple. You want to match the depth of your bed to what's underneath it. If you've got open, healthy soil below, you can go a little shallower. But if you don't, or if something's blocking that root growth, like wire, you need to build the depth into the bed itself. For most situations, somewhere around 10 to 12 inches is a really solid baseline. These new beds are actually 17 inches tall. It's going to give me enough room for strong root growth, better moisture control, and more flexibility in what I can plant. And the nice thing is, this is one of the easier things to fix. If you have wooden beds, you can usually just add another layer on top of that, stack another board, increase the height, and now you've got that extra depth. But if you're building something from scratch, this is something you want to get right the first time. Because depth isn't just about how the bed looks, it directly affects how your plants grow. The next mistake is using the wrong material for your raised beds. And this is one where there's actually a lot of flexibility, but there's still a few things that you want to think through before you build, because technically you don't even need a material at all. You could just mound up soil 6 to 12 inches high and plant directly into it, and you'd still get a lot of the benefits of a raised bed, better drainage, looser soil, all that. But most people, myself included, prefer to have some kind of structure. Keeps things neat, it holds the soil in place, and it just makes the garden easier to manage. Now, when it comes to materials, wood is usually the most common option. It's affordable, it's easy to work with, and you can build just about any size or shape you want. That's what I've used a lot over the years. In fact, almost exclusively. You can go with something like Douglas fir if you want to keep costs down, or step up to something like cedar or redwood if you want it to last a little longer. We went cheap when we moved in 5 years ago because we were already spending a lot on other things. And here we are 5 years later, the boards were already rotting and coming apart. So cedar or redwood would be good wooden options. The one thing I personally stay away from is treated lumber. Now, it's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still not something I want in direct contact with the soil that I'm growing food in. I'd rather replace a bed in a few years than wonder about what might be leaching into the soil. Now, beyond wood, you've got a few other solid options. Fabric beds are one. They're lightweight, easy to set up, and one of the big benefits is that when roots hit the side of the fabric, they air prune. So instead of circling like they would in a pot, they branch out more, which could lead to a healthier root system. And then you've got metal raised beds. These are probably the most durable option. They hold their shape well, they don't rot, and they're gonna last a long time, 20 to 30 years. A long time compared to wood. And there are a lot of different versions of these now. For me, when I was planning this rebuild, I actually spent a lot of time looking at different options. I ended up going with Vago beds. They really checked all the boxes I cared about. I liked the color options, I liked the size variety, and possibly the biggest thing was the flexibility. They're modular, so you're not locked into one shape or layout. And if I want to change something later or add on to it or just tweak the setup, I can do that without starting over. And they've got a lot of add-ons you can incorporate later if you want to go that direction. So for me, it just made sense long-term because I will have these beds for the next 20 or 30 years. So I wanted to make the right decision because once I set these up, I'm going to be working with them for a long time. Vago is now a part of our new online store, so I will leave a link below. And then the last option I'll mention, because people always bring it up, is stone or brick. And those can look really good. They're extremely durable, they're not going to rot, and once they're in place, they're basically permanent. But that's also the trade-off. They take more time to build, and they usually cost the most. And if you ever want to change your layout later, it's a lot harder, if not impossible, to do. So they make a lot of sense if you're confident in your design and you want something literally permanent, but not as much if you're still figuring things out. So there's not really one perfect material. The mistake isn't choosing wood over metal or metal over stone. The mistake is choosing something without thinking about how long you want it to last, how flexible you want your garden to be, and how easy it's going to be to change later. The next mistake is how you fill your raised beds. And this is a big one because this is where most of the cost is. And it's also where people are most likely to try to cut corners. And I get it, I've done the same thing. Like I mentioned earlier, when we moved here, we had money going in many different directions, as you do when you move. So I went cheap on what I filled my raised beds with, and I filled them entirely with mushroom compost. Now that can work. On paper, it made sense. It was organic. It looked rich. It held moisture. It seemed like exactly what you'd want, and it was a steal. But within days of planting, every single seedling dried up and died. And at the time, I couldn't figure it out. The soil looked good, it felt good, everything about it seemed right. But after doing some testing on it, I found out it was extremely high in salts, and it basically burned everything I planted into it. So that's one version of this mistake, using something that seems like good soil, but isn't balanced. Now, the more common version of this mistake is trying to save money when you're filling your raised beds, and that usually shows up as filling the bottom with logs, sticks, branches, anything you can find to take up space so you don't have to buy as much soil. And again, it sounds like a smart idea. Use less soil, save money, let all that wood break down over time. But what actually happens is a little different. As those materials break down, they don't just turn into perfect soil. They can tie up nitrogen, they can create uneven moisture throughout the bed, and over time the structure of your soil becomes inconsistent. So early on, things might look fine, but later you start to see problems. Plants growing unevenly, certain areas drying out faster than others, and overall just less consistent results. And when that happens, most people try to fix it from the top. They add fertilizer, they add compost, they try to correct what they're seeing, but the problem isn't on top. It's built into the bed itself at this point. And once that's the case, it becomes really hard to fully fix it without tearing it up and starting over. So the better approach here is to keep things simple. Use a consistent, well-balanced mix, especially in that root zone where your plants are actually growing. Something that drains well, holds moisture, and has enough organic matter to support growth. Now, if you want to save money, there are ways to do that, but the goal shouldn't be to fill your bed as cheaply as possible. The goal should be to build something that works not just this season, but for years. And this is exactly the kind of thing I go deeper on in my new raised bed course. Not just what to do, but how to set it up in a way that actually works long term. I'll link that below as well if you want to hold my hand and go step by step through the entire process of raised bed gardening. Another common mistake with raised beds is not refreshing the soil. The first year or two, everything looks great. The soil is loose, it drains well, plants grow fast. But every year after that, you're slowly losing some of what made it good in the first place. It settles, it breaks down, and some of it literally leaves the bed when you pull out plants. So over time, the level drops and the quality drops with it. And that's when you start to notice things changing. Plants aren't as strong, yields aren't what they used to be, and a lot of people try to fix that with fertilizer. But most of the time, it's not just a nutrient issue, it's the soil itself that is changing. So the fix here is simple. Each year, add a couple inches back to the top. Compost, raised bed mix, something to replace what's been lost. You don't need to overthink it. You don't need to mix it in. Just consistently add it back. Because raised beds aren't something that you set up once and forget. They're something you maintain. And if you stay on top of this, you avoid that slow decline that catches most people off guard. Another mistake that makes a big difference over time is not mulching your beds. And this is one of those things that seems optional until you see what it actually does. Because without mulch, your soil is directly exposed. The sun hits it, moisture evaporates faster, and you end up watering more than you need to. And at the same time, you're fighting weeds all season. So you're doing more work for worse results. This is where mulch really helps. It keeps the moisture in the soil, it protects the surface from drying out, and it creates a more stable environment for your plants. If you've ever pulled back mulch and looked at the soil underneath, it's usually still moist. Now, right next to it, uncovered soil could be completely dry. It saves water and it makes your plants more consistent. And then there's the whole weed side of it. Mulch acts like a barrier. It blocks light so weed seeds don't germinate as easily, which means you spend less time pulling weeds and more time actually working with your plants. And over time, organic mulch breaks down and becomes part of the soil. So it's not just protecting the soil, it's improving it. Now, the only thing you want to be careful with is how you use it. When you plant, move the mulch aside, plant into the soil, and then bring the mulch back around the plant. You don't want to mix it into the soil because as it breaks down, it can tie up nitrogen. And depending on your climate, you may need to adjust what you use. Sometimes in the winter, I have an issue with slugs and snails, and certain mulches, I found straw to be one of those, give them a place to hide. So it's not a one size fits all, but the principle still stays the same. Leaving your soil exposed is almost always going to create more problems than it solves. And mulch is one of the simplest ways to fix that. Another mistake is not protecting your beds in the off season. And this one is easy to skip because by the time you get to the end of the season, you're usually done. You've harvested, you're tired, and it's tempting to just walk away and deal with it later. But what happens during that off season really matters because if your soil is left exposed, a few things can happen. If you get heavy rain, you can lose soil to erosion. If you get a lot of sun, the surface can dry out and break down, and over time, you're losing structure and organic matter without even realizing it. So you go to the next season starting behind. And just like everything else we've talked about, it's not something you notice right away, it's a slow decline. So the goal here is just to protect the soil, and there are a couple of ways to do that. The easiest is mulch. A thicker layer going into the off-season acts like a blanket. It protects the surface, holds moisture, and keeps things more stable. Another option is cover crops. And that's just growing something over the bed instead of leaving it bare. The roots help hold the soil in place, and when those plants die back or get cut down, they add organic matter back into the soil. So you're protecting it and improving it at the same time. Now, depending on your climate, this might look different. If you've got cold winters, you're protecting from freezing and thawing. And if you've got milder winters or rainy seasons, you're protecting from erosion and nutrient loss. But the idea is the same. You don't want to leave your soil exposed because what you do or don't do during that off season shows up in your results next year. And this is one of those simple steps that can make a bigger difference than most people expect. If there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. Most raised bed problems don't come from what you're doing right now. They come from decisions that were made at the very beginning or things that were skipped along the way. The layout, the depth, the materials, how you filled the beds, and how you maintain them over time. And the tricky part is most of those decisions seem right in the moment. They save money, they save time. I've done it too, but over time they start to show up in how your garden performs. Sometimes right away, like I had with the mushroom compost, and sometimes a few years later when things aren't growing the way they used to. The good news is, once you understand what actually is causing those problems, they're not hard to avoid. You don't need a complicated system. You don't need perfect soil. You just need a solid foundation and a simple approach that you stay consistent with. That's what I'm focusing on now as I rebuild this garden, and it's what I recommend you do too. And if you want to see how I'm actually rebuilding this whole setup step by step and how we're building out our whole property, that's all happening over on my second channel, The Gardens at SkyRidge. I'll link that here on the screen, and I'll see you guys next time.